bring about positive changes in the world? It is such a promising topic to interact upon. Let's listen to Govindan. Yes, please.
Thanks, Asha. So I'm going to start my presentation now. So good morning, everyone. So as Asha mentioned, I'm going to talk about pop culture and how it can be used by content creators to create positive changes in the world. So let's start with what pop culture is. So when you type in pop culture into Google, this is the definition that pops up. And if you really look at it, it's much less of a definition than characteristics of pop culture. And this is exactly what pop culture is, right? It's something that is transmitted over vast mass media, and it's aimed at it says young people, but it's more like it does not have as many differences in the audience. It is meant for a generic target audience. So because it is unlike its cousin high culture, which is opera and fine arts, pop culture usually is not looked at as classy. It's looked at as trivial, and as it does not need extensive training or experience for it to be enjoyed. So so, but is it trivial then? Is it something that we can really use to make a difference? But I believe that simplicity is what makes it an effective tool for driving change. So you have pop culture itself driving change through movies. So I say movies because in Kerala, for us, one of the mainstream pop culture mediums is movies. A lot of our pop culture is around movies, and it comes from movies and music. And so I'd like to focus on movies in this particular case because it is something that is quite understandable, and it's something that can be um, you know um, relatable to people. Okay, I'm really sorry about this. I'm a little nervous, and it's also a little hard because I'm not speaking to a live audience. So it's like speaking to a screen, and I cannot gauge interaction. And my apologies for this.
Yeah, fine, Govind. No problems.
Yeah. Uh, okay. So movies. That's where I stopped. So yes. So movies itself can convey social messages, right? It's everybody who says that the cinema ganam. That's just wishful thinking because it's something that brands have realized with product placement, and they've realized with celebrity endorsements. You have that because pop culture has these subconscious has these subconscious impacts within our minds, and that's what they're trying to tap into. And it's the same thing that you can tap into by using pop culture references within your content to improve the effectiveness of a message that you're trying to convey to an audience. So, in my limited experience as I wouldn't say a social media influencer, it's um, as a person trying to convey serious messages through social media, it is that it's very hard to grab people's attention with a serious topic. Uh, unless they are looking for serious topics. But on social media, the problem is that most people are on social media for entertainment, and the moment they smell a whiff of seriousness, uh, they say it's non-mamaram content, and they just scroll past it. And this is where you can use pop culture and pop culture references actually, because it is said that you have 8 seconds to grab somebody's attention and keep them engaged. Hopefully, I've been successful at that because I've passed 8 seconds already. Uh, and so, when used sparingly and when used well, pop culture references within your content can draw attention, keep people engaged, and get them to go through the entire post, which is essentially what you're trying to do, which means that you've achieved your objective. So I'm going to show a few examples of this, how we've done it in Pinkly. So these are two examples. So the post on top. So I've not included all the slides. I've just included 4 slides from each post, and I've included 2 posts. The post on top is uh, about arranged marriages. It's meant to talk about uh, certain underlying patriarchal and sexist tendencies within the arranged marriages system that we have in Kerala, because our content is based in it is meant for Kerala. So what we did there was, it starts off with uh, pop culture reference in the form of a movie screenshot, and then we used videos from within movies which uh, complement the text that we have written. So what this does is get people to relate to scenes, read the text and relate to the scenes, and get them engaged uh, through the videos. The second post is about good parenting. Basically, it's just a it's just a more fun way to talk about good parenting. So we thought a fun way to talk about good parenting would be to take examples of Renji Panikar scenes from movies where in our generation, in the current generation, he is the cool parent. In the previous generation, it was Lalu Alex. This generation, it is Renji Panikar. So we thought using scenes and depicting how he handles those situations, how he's able to convey thoughts to his child uh, in the movie through these situations um, can be used as examples of how one can be a good parent. And so in the first case, the text was the base and the scene was used to complement it. In the second case, we used the scene and the text to complement the scene. So these are 2 ways in which we used pop culture to improve the effectiveness of the message that is conveyed. So if you imagine what this would look like without the pop culture references, uh, well, I've got an example of that. I'd like to show you an example where where we talked about why we need better Malayalam TV series. Now, this is a video, and I'm going to swipe past all the slides. It is not going to be enough time to read through the slides, but then it is just to show you what it looks like, what the presentation looks like. Okay, so those were 10 slides essentially, and it was all text. So what happens in such a situation is that people would come in, see the slide, there's pop culture reference in the start, so they might swipe. They see that it's all text, and they would not be interested because not many of us are on social media to read bulk load of text, and hence the message is kind of lost in the process, and only your core audience, only people uh, who are into reading. And if you're somebody who's who would read a post like this, congratulations, you're in the minority, because a vast majority of people just scroll past this and they don't really read. And this is where having pop culture references in the form of videos and even images for that matter come in handy, because it improves relatability of content and it gets people to basically pay attention to what you're trying to say. But at the start, I said that it has to be used sparingly and well. Now, there's a downside to not following that guideline. Uh, so the next post that I'm going to show, I'm just going to bore you with another example. This example is about colorism. It's when we wanted to talk about colorism and when we wanted to convey that, while we engage in colorism in our everyday life, it is not something that should be done, that we should not crack, jokes that are about people's color and their skin tone, and that it is not acceptable. But as you can see from the comments there, it was not taken very well. And oh, by the way, this is one of the, this was one comment which was toned down. It is one of the least controversial comments. There were other comments which talked about other issues, which you will understand when I play the video. So this post was kind of perfect because it had just three text slides and it had a lot of audiovisual content to engage the audience and improve relatability. But what happened in this case was that the conversation diverted from being about colorism and it went into political correctness in movies when that was not the intention of this post. That was not the intention of the text either. But because we used multiple examples of colorism, because it turned into, at this point, it kind of turned into examples of colorism in Malayalam movies because we had used multiple slides. And this led to people talking about, how uh, cinema should not be subject to political correctness. And it just took the conversation in a whole different direction. You will find uh, threads after threads under this post which talk about political correctness, and it diverted the conversation from the crux issue, which was colorism, and it took it in another direction. So this is why I believe that it's a good tool, it is a useful tool, but then it has to be used sparingly because if used if used unwisely, it can be used, it can divert the direction and essentially create a strawman argument uh, in the comment section. Okay. Now, even when you do this right, even when everything is done right, there's a small issue with using pop culture references because it's not like a research post or it's not like a long form article. It's essentially a quick read. You're giving people uh, something that they can read within 3 minutes or less. And so you sacrifice depth for snackability. And so the audience does not have anything more than a basic understanding of the subject. All it does, it gets them to think in the direction that you want them to think in. And it is up to them to take it ahead from there. And which is which is fine if that is your objective. So what we have to realize when we use pop culture references in our posts, in our articles, in any content that you create is that if you take so let's take, for example, gender equality. If you have somebody at a zero who believes that gender equality should not exist, that women and men should be completely different, and there is no scope for gender equality. And then there is the other end of the spectrum, which is 10, where somebody believes that gender equality should be the norm. That's how it should be, and everyone is created equal. The person at zero will not be influenced by your post. They are not going to read that post and move from 0 to 10. The person at 10 would most likely agree with your post and share your post and comment underneath. But your real target audience for a post which talks about gender equality, which uses pop culture references, will be the people at the middle of the spectrum. People who could be ranked at maybe 5, 6, and 7. These are people who are on the precipice. They are trying to understand. So you are giving them material which they can relate to and they can use later to have discussions with people. And it is essentially something that they can use to base their further reading and further research on. And once you understand that is the expectation that one should have of a post like this, of a post that uses pop culture references, because you reach a large target audience, you reach a wide number of people, but then you do not give them complete knowledge about the subject. You give them an introduction into the topic and get them to talk about it with their peers and convey the message. So the change is slow, but as we talked about pop culture at the start, the good thing about pop culture is that it transcends race, religion, and social divides, and hence over time you'll be able to influence a larger number of people with pop culture references, and this will compound and reach, reap substantial rewards and dividends. So what do I mean by that? It is that by using pop culture references, we not only end up, so you have this subsection of pop culture, which is, films like Pink Lungi, and you have Get Roasted Gayatri on YouTube. You have the Malu Analyst on YouTube. All these platforms use pop culture references to drive, to feedback and critique pop culture, and drive, for lack of a better word, political correctness uh, into pop culture, and get pop culture itself to transform and create influences. So you can see this in Mollywood movies, the way female characters are depicted in Mollywood movies. So in the early 90s and 2000s, uh, they were not given as much importance, but in the past decade, you can see how things have changed. So you had Tessa from 22 Female Court M, who was a victim of rape, who went on to seek revenge. When in the 90s, most movies talked about, their act of defiance as suicide. Uh, or you have Aparna from Mayanati, who proclaims that sex is not a promise, which, in stark contrast to, the virgin obsession that we've had in the past. So the cycle keeps progressing, and using pop culture references to spread the message is one way to keep pushing forward. And that was my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Govind. It was interesting and very engaging, and I'm sure all of us are familiar with the platforms that Govindan has referred to, and we can all relate to the contents that he has talked about. Let's have an interaction now. Please raise your comments and queries now, and your observations as well. Also, feel free to use the chat box.
Well, thank you, Mr. Govindan. That was a very pointed kind of presentation, although it was brief. So, just a couple of things I would like to say on this particular subject and in this context. So, I was wondering whether this debate about popular culture and high culture, I was wondering whether this debate has really taken off. As you said, there is a great limitation in resorting to conventional methods to get across to people. Okay. Whereas if you are using popular culture platforms, things really become viral. Okay. So I was just wondering whether this advantage of popular culture, does it get reflected in follow-up actions? Just a curiosity that I had.
So the thing is with pop culture, it by follow-up actions, it would not be immediate, because since it lacks depth, what it would do is it would seed the thought in somebody's mind. So it's too early to say if it would really lead to action in real life, especially the work that we're doing now, because we expect it to show up maybe 10, 15 years down the line. But we can notice how pop culture influences have actually changed the mentality uh, in terms of movies, the kind of movies that we've had. It has changed how Kerala has changed to be a more liberal society. It has changed to become a more open society. There have been contrary influences too. You can see, there's actually a brilliant analysis by the Malu analyst, who talks about how 90s cinema has led to how we have this um, male chauvinist tendencies in certain parts of Kerala right now. So it does not directly lead to any change. It just gets the message conveyed, and it is up to the person who receives the message. It seeds it into their mind, and then it takes it from there. So as I said, it is not it's not a direct impactor for change, but it can lead to change. It's a catalyst.
Yeah, Mr. Govindan, actually, I didn't expect this kind of link. I was not talking about change, but let us say a kind of eruption of protest. Okay. As happens in many countries. For example, the anti-Vietnam War protests in America, they had a large component of pop culture. Okay, the very slogan that some of them raised, "Make love, not war," that is up on pop. It is something that happens rarely. I mean, when you catch hold of such a slogan. So I was only talking about the kind of protest that can erupt. But change comes much later.
Yes, yes. We did have some pop culture references being used in the CAA protests.
Yeah.
Uh, it is happening, but then it's not as it's not as widely seen as one would expect in the states, where you have so you can see in protests in the states, you can see people who would walk around in Star Wars costumes, because those movies essentially were talked about eugenics and fascism. So they've drawn inspiration from that to protest against fascism by showing those characters. So we've not reached that stage yet, because we're slowly getting there. We have slogans and we have placards now, but then eventually we might reach a stage where we have full-fledged pop culture references being used in protests.
Thank you.
Hello, Govind.
Yes, Umar.
I'm a faculty here. I'm Umar.
Yes.
Just my question is, you said that pop culture transcends boundaries of religion, race, and things like that, gender. But my question is, many a time what the pop culture does is actually re-entrench these boundaries, and because they often trade in stereotypes. For example, gender stereotypes, racial stereotypes. Of course, there are certain, black has been, for example, valorized in many pop culture forms like jazz and all. But nevertheless, those pop culture tends to, further re-entrench those stereotypes rather than challenging them is something that I felt, especially, watching some of the movies, for example. They try to re-entrench the stereotypes. For example, if you watch some of the movies, you can see this. So how can we say that they challenge or rather transcend the phrase you used, means racial boundaries?
So what I meant by transcend is that it is available for all. It is not. It is not. It is. You don't really need training to watch or enjoy pop culture. It's not like Kathakali, where you'd have to know what the gestures mean, and it might not be enjoyable for everybody. But with pop culture, it is usually in a very trivial form where it can be understood by everyone. But yes, pop culture, as you said, has pitfalls. So one of the posts that I'd shown as an example had instances of colorism in movies, which is a huge issue, because there's always this debate between creative liberties and what liberties a filmmaker or an artist can take when they create pop culture. And it is usually it's sort of like freedom of speech. There is absolute freedom of speech, which I believe is what someone like Christopher Hitchens would advocate. But then that is, it is under the presumption that the audience understands what is good and what is right and what is wrong, which is not often the case. One cannot presume that the audience can make out right from wrong. So it is the responsibility of pop culture to make sure that they convey the right messages. And so by using pop culture references, one can drive change to push them to be more politically correct. So you can use these references from pop culture, because many people would have seen these movies, many people would have noticed these instances, and by talking about it and by pointing out the flaws in these movies, scenes, images, you can draw attention to it and get people to change their mindset.
Govind, means I think this begs another question. The thing is that you mentioned Christopher Hitchens, and the problem with pop culture, it is very much under the sway of the market. The market controls. This is also evident, I think, in some of Christopher Hitchens' own productions. For example, that documentary called "The Angel of Hell" on Mother Teresa. So it was such a damning piece. Nothing positive that Mother Teresa and her, society was doing was highlighted, and only the negative things were highlighted. Because market needs certain kind of diets, and when market determines popular culture and its contours, whether at all the possibility of being politically correct arises is my question.
Yes. So that's a tough question, and that's it's very relevant because in the end, popular culture is up to the creator. So it's whatever the creator wants to convey. So the point that I was trying to make is that it can be a good message. It's a good tool for propaganda, and it can be used for good and it can be used for bad too. So it is completely dependent on the creator how it is used. But either way, it can be very effective because it reaches a large target audience. It reaches a vast majority of people.
Thank you, Govind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Govindan. I'm Narayanan. I'm a faculty member. I was just intrigued. It was quite an interesting presentation trying to effectively stand pop culture on its head and make it serve what one would assume to be a rather different purpose. But I was just wondering about certain streams of theorization within popular culture, especially the Chomskyan and the ones by Stuart Hall, where largely speaking, popular culture was seen as something that communicates almost unconsciously. Like the whole analogy with an iceberg where only 1/8 is above the sea level, only 1/8 or some kind of that kind of proportion is on a conscious level, while the rest communicates actually unconsciously. So in your attempt to actually make pop culture, as you claim, as you say, to do good, how much of this is conscious and how much of this is unconscious? How does a communication work? Are you trying also at the same time to factor in or program in elements which communicate on an unconscious level? That is one question. The second question is, especially when you're engaging through the images that you showed or the video clips that you showed that are drawn from films, is it basically popular culture or a critique of popular culture that you're engaged in? In which case, my first question will be answered in a different way, that it is quite a conscious effort if it's a critique. So is it actually popular culture or a critique of popular culture that your website and your platform is really engaged in? Thank you. Yeah, that's a question.
Thanks for the question. So so I'd like to answer the second question first before I move to the first one. So the second question was if Pinklungi as a platform engages in critique of popular culture, which we do. We do engage in the critique of popular culture where we talk about certain tendencies in popular culture which we believe should not be popularized, which should not be propagated because, as you said, it has subconscious implications, and that has to be understood. So it is the creator's responsibility to make sure that that message is not conveyed. So we do critique, but at the same time, we use popular culture to complement our posts too. So, so what we try to do is essentially get people to relate to the post a lot better by using these audiovisual cues. So it's a conscious effort to create a subconscious uh, engagement in people, because we believe that by using these videos, people get drawn to the content, and people engage with the content. People spend more time on the content because uh, it is something that they've seen on screen, because it's something that they can relate to. It's a character that they like. Does that
I understand. I think in one sense that is the best you can say. I mean, I'm not. I'm not saying it's your limitation, but basically you are using conscious efforts to somewhat counter the unconscious effects of popular culture, where popular culture comes to be put in inverted commas, in quotations, so to speak, and you're actually quoting popular culture in order to combat popular culture itself. That is right. That is basically what is usually being done, even in what one would call critical written attempts, or critical attempts of a different kind too. But I was just also wondering, have you tried any quantifiable or even qualitative methods to assess the effects of your enterprise in terms of because one thing that is very curious that I found in recent times is that social media, even when we assume that it can be opinion makers, or it can actually assist in the formation of opinions, usually seem to buttress very stringent positions that have already been taken. It is not as if we use social media to learn and to change ourselves, but it's more often a case of using social media to reassert what we have already learned. So, do you have any? This is probably not a fair question, but still, do you have any indications, any proof, or any quantifiable results to the results of your enterprise of trying to use popular culture for making a positive change?
Well, sir, I guess you've hit the nail on the head. The problem with social media is that it plays on two fallacies. It plays on availability heuristic, and it plays on confirmation bias. And the algorithm works that way. So the
Mm,
algorithm will show you things that you already believe in. Hence, both these fallacies come into play, and you tend to see things. So your belief gets reinforced. So that is a genuine problem. But so that's on one side. So I'll talk about how we try to combat that, how we try to uh, have an audience over a broad spectrum. So that's one thing that we try to do. Uh, but before that, right now the only way that we have to that we can gauge the effectiveness of our posts is through engagement. How much engagement we get through each post or article, and that's usually calculated using online tools. So, uh, so what I would consider a successful post is a post that gets good engagement, which reaches a lot of people, and a lot of people interact with the post.
mm,
So on an average, so if you take a purely text-based post, like the TV serials post that I had shown,
mm,
the average engagement for a post like that is about 7%.
mm,
So 7% of our target audience engages with with that post.
mm,
But when you take a post which has pop culture references, the average engagement of those posts shoots up straight to about 20%.
mm. Which has
So
more,
using pop culture,
which probably has more visual content in it.
yes, which is more visual content, which is more pop culture references in it. It
Mm,
leads to, it makes it more shareable. It reaches more people, and it leads to people interacting with that post a lot more.
mm,
Uh, so what we try to do as a firm is we try to mix serious content with fun content. So we try to, we try to reach out to a larger target audience by means of that. So we do not stick to any ideology per se. We try to stay neutral everywhere, and we give people perspective.
mm,
So by doing that, we try to engage with both sides of the argument. So posts like the TV series posts, or there are other posts which we generally brand as discussion posts, which is meant to be a discussion, which is meant to be a debate, which is meant to attract both sides of the argument. And then we have other posts which are solely pop culture driven, which might present a certain perspective, but then not in a way where we completely shame that the opposite side of the view, the opposite side of the coin. So that too leads to interaction. So we try to reach out to a broad spectrum by staying neutral and not enforcing a certain point of view. So we try as much as we can to not enforce a point of view, because it would essentially mean that we shun out a certain section of the target audience.
Yeah. Thank you for the conversation, and may I also tell you that I have not regularly, but I've followed Pink Lungi because some of my friends had referred that to me, and so I've followed that. And let me remind you in a rather naughty way that neutrality is also another form of politics.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, more questions.
Janaki, if you're speaking, we can't hear you. You may have to turn up your mic.
Sorry, I think there's a problem with my headphones. So, can you hear me now?
Yeah. Now you're perfectly audible.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Hello, Govindan. I'm Janaki, and I'm a faculty of the department. I'm afraid the audibility of my system was slightly, uncertain this time. So I don't think I caught everything that you said, but I was trying my level best to follow you. And I'm afraid I have not really followed the site, but I'm sure I'll do. Pink Lungi, it sounds very interesting. I have not been a very, regular follower of the site, but I will. But I just wanted to ask you. One particular thing is that from the beginning of the Malayalam media, that is the print media, what I have found very interesting is that most of our magazines or newspapers have always, kept aside a space to critique itself and other forms of media. It could be popular films. We always had a film criticism column, always. Madhubhumikku Kozhikode undairunnu, Cynic undairunnu. Many other, almost all the papers and magazines have earmarked a space to critique, and not just art cinema or very serious forms of art alone. Even the popular forms were taken into very serious consideration in the written, in the print media. So what I want to ask you is that I presume, from whatever I could gather from your presentation, the Pink Lungi offers a platform to politically engage with the representations in popular media, and trying to point out or call out this kind of stereotypes. It could be gender, it could be caste, all kinds of stereotypes, and also to bring our attention to the politically incorrect depictions that are going on there. Basically, try to promote critical spirit among the audience, and not just swallow whatever is being disseminated there. What I want to ask you is that how different is this? Whatever you're trying to do on Pink Lungi, how different is it from the kind of critical discussions that were being carried out in the Malayalam media even earlier? It must be the print media. They were also doing it. So how is this different? In what way is it different, apart from the visual content you are adding to it? I hope I'm clear. Am I clear?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yes. So that's what I wanted to ask you. How does this become a kind of a different, apart from its format, which is very obviously different.
Yeah. So, ma'am, in reality, this is just an evolution of that format. It is just that format, how it is evolved into social media and how it's evolved into the internet age. So it is essentially, as you said, using audiovisual mediums to convey similar messages. It's also it's it's to make what one would trivialize as clickbait. So for example, something like the parental, the parenting lessons example that I had shown on the slide. It it was taking movie scenes from Reggie Panikar movies to show good parenting lessons. So it's just an evolution of what we had in the past. It is just trying to take it into the social media space and using similar formula to spread the same message. Because the thing about social media is that uh, unlike the print medium, it needs content to be more snackable. It needs content to be shorter, and because people don't really engage, spend too much time reading content. So it's to make content that can be absorbed in a short span of time.
Yeah, so can I just follow it up? Who creates the content? Is it one person? See, that's one major difference I feel. In the print media, there will be one author who's writing this, right? It would be a columnist, or it could be the editorial board, whoever. I mean, it would be the editorial decision to intervene. But in your, I think in your the particular platform that you're floating, it would be, is it interactive? Is it that the people also participate? Is it one person who creates the content? Is it a group? How does this work? I don't know whether if somebody has asked this question already. If I'm asking you to repeat yourself, I'm sorry about that. But if you've already said these things, then forget it, because I told
No,
you I
no,
had.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's okay. So no, nobody has asked this. Essentially, we're a team of 15. So all of us write. So we have different categories that we focus on, and we write on different topics. And essentially, the audio visual elements are come out of brainstorming sessions with the entire team. So we sit and think about what's the best way to present a certain topic. And there are times when we decide that see, it's best we do not use any audiovisual elements because it will just dilute the message. So that's how it works. And ma'am, there was I'm sorry, I lost the a part of your question. So one part you asked if it was a team or
No,
if it
I
was
was just wondering. I was just wondering whether the kind of participation from the people who are reading, the people who have joined the group, maybe, is it censored, or is it free for all? Does everybody get a chance to comment and interact with the people? I mean, with the creators of the content, because I'm sure then there would be very diverse opinions coming on the same thing. You may say that something is politically incorrect, but there would be completely different, completely views that are completely opposite to yours that people might, definitely. That's what I find on cyber space. It can never be one-sided at all. So how do you handle that? Whatever is
uh,
politically, yeah, please, yeah.
yeah, ma'am, you just you just pointed me in a direction where I didn't think of. It's the comment section of these posts. So all anybody who reads the post is free to comment under the post. We do not really censor anything. We censor it only if there is abusive language that is used. That is the only time we delete a comment. Otherwise, we let people express their opinions because well, freedom of speech, unless their intent is to cause you know um, pain and harm to somebody, we do not really censor comments. So you do end up getting a lot of interaction from people, uh, especially in posts where you talk about political correctness, or when we talk about caste. there are topics which seem like they're on the forefront right now. When you talk about it, when you bring about posts talking about this, there are people who come and comment, and you tend to have debates. But the problem with this is also that the debates they tend to have the regular debating fallacies. So you end up having a lot of random conversations, and at times you have to mediate these conversations. You have to engage in speaking to these people and getting them to focus on the topic at hand.
Thank you, Govindan. That was a very, very interesting, revelatory kind of a conversation, and I'll definitely follow your space better now. Now that you have made your presentation, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Govind, there is a question in the chat box. Govind?
There's a question on the chat box.
Sir, I don't think he can hear.
Mr. Govind, there's a question from one of our students, Rosemary and Dominic, in the chat box. Can you see it? Mr. Govind? Yeah, there's a communication problem, I think.
Yeah.
Mr. Govind?
So he's on mute. I think he'll return. Probably that Bluetooth issue again.
Yeah, we'll wait.
Hello?
Yes, Mr. Govind. There is a question in the chat box.
Yes. I was about to answer that, and that's when I noticed
fine.
it was not working. Yes. So my answer is that yes, our society seems to be surprisingly open to ideas and discussion, especially especially if the younger generation seems to be quite open to such ideas. And one thing that I've noticed is that people are usually respectful of ideas, and even when they come up with discussions, as I mentioned, we usually censor comments which are hateful, and we've not really had to censor many comments. So in the 1,000-odd posts that we've put up, I think we've censored maybe 4 comments in total, 4 or 5. It's been respectful discussions that people have had with each other, and where they've talked about, even when they had a contrary perspective, they would try to put up a logical argument. And it is the same that I've actually noticed in other pages. So there are pages like the Fascism Slayer, who tends to be a little more radical in his approach and way of thinking. But even under his posts, if you go look at it, it is not, there's widespread acceptance, and it seems like there are lots of people who are open to such ideas. But while I say that, there's one thing that I'd like to add. It could be availability bias and confirmation heuristics at play, because I have a limited scope of people, a limited sample pool, and the people who follow Pink Lungi or the Fascism Slayer or Pop Cult Tribe, all these people might be of a similar wavelength or vibe. as they call it now. And that could be the reason why we feel that everybody is open and progressive. It could just as easily be the other case, but in my experience, it is. I've noticed that most people are open to new ideas and liberal thinking.
Any more questions? Sir, it seems there are no more questions.
Okay, you can wind up.
In that case, Govind, shall we wind up?
Yes, 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 we can.
Okay, so thank you, Govind, for sparing your time and joining us here. Thank you for your presentation on popular culture that has a huge potential, as you have rightly pointed out, and when used right, can bring about a lot of positive, progressive changes in the society. The changes, as you said, are very slow, but they are happening unconsciously in a very subterranean fashion. Thank you, Govindan. Looking forward for more interactions with you. All the very best for Pink Lungi, and we'll be keeping track of the amazing stuff that you create there. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you for the interaction that you all generated. Yes, Govind, would you like to speak?
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for giving me this opportunity and this platform to speak. I hope it was informative to you. I like the interaction. Thank you for asking me questions, and it has helped me think about it in perspectives that I had not thought about before. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Govindan. And a small reminder to students, research scholars, and the faculty. We have 2 sessions of open defense of dissertations, PhD dissertations coming up. One tomorrow at 3 in the afternoon. We have our research scholar Adira Nandan defending a thesis tomorrow. And day after tomorrow at 11, we have Aparna B, another research scholar in the department defending a thesis. So don't forget 2 open defense sessions tomorrow and after tomorrow. Thank you.
Sure, sir. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the interactions that you have generated. We shall come in next week. Thank you. Happy New Year.